Hi, I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground Magazine, and of course, my esteemed colleague, Mike Gast, former Vice President of Communications at Campgrounds of America. And we're excited to be back for another episode of WCM's Outdoor Hospitality Update. And the weather is really great here in Michigan, so that's a blessing. So it's like in the 70s and beautiful. So hopefully, wherever you're at, there's nice weather too. I imagine it's nice in Hawaii. It's always nice in Hawaii.
It's it's a non-factor, so we don't
Until
even
it
we
hits
don't
the
think
rainy
about it.
season. So, when is the rainy season, Mike?
Oh, that's on the other side of the island, and that's
Oh,
kind of in the
okay.
fall, but we don't worry about that. It never rains here. What do you want to
Okay.
live in the rain for? Ruins your camping.
It's beautiful in New Hampshire today. It's about the same as it is in Michigan, frankly.
Yeah, yeah. It's beautiful here. It's full sun. It's in the 70s, so it's not too hot. A couple weeks ago, it was like in the 90s and very humid. So can't complain. But our guest today is Jayne Cohen and her brother David, and it's great to have
Hello.
you guys on. They're from Campground Consulting Group, and I guess Jayne, just give us a little bit of background for people who don't know, how, how you got into the consulting business, and your family used to own a park, correct, when you were growing
Yes,
up?
yes. We David and I grew up at a park. My father uh, one day was driving to our vacation home and saw a sign, and this is a true story. A sign posted at this old rundown campground for sale. And even though we had never camped a day in our life, he went over there and took a look at it and bought it, and we were in the campground business.
Okay, yeah,
But our firm now, we were at that park. That was an old rundown park. We turned it into a Jellystone in New Hampshire. Uh, brought it up to being number one or two highest grossing Jellystone at the time. I sold that to a multi-chain firm and joined that firm as the president of the company, and had the opportunity to run 10 campgrounds, or oversee 10 campgrounds. And when I left that company, went into consulting.
okay, yeah. And you worked for a while with David Cohen,
Yes,
who
yes,
former National Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds CEO and president, and just a great guy. I know we've had him on the show.
yep.
So,
And
uh,
David and I were Gorin and Cohen Consulting Group, and which has now turned into Campground Consulting Group. But David simply retired. He's enjoying his retirement, so I have a harder and harder time of even getting a hold of him because he's so busy retiring. He's loving it.
well, that's great. And of course, you couldn't work without a David, so you had to bring your brother
Yes,
in.
I actually have
So,
a bunch of Davids in my firm, so I have a bunch of them. But yes,
and David was telling me you guys work really well together. So,
we do. We actually do. Um, we came from a family business when we were in the campground business together, and we've always been very close. And our firm has just gotten when I started out in consulting, I was working more so with current operators and more so on operations, on marketing, and so forth. Because as you guys know, developing campgrounds, really, we haven't seen that. I've been in the industry for 40 years, and we
yeah,
haven't seen that until probably the last 3 or 4 years, right?
yeah.
And so I mainly worked with current operators, sometimes expanding, but mainly on operations, marketing, and those types of things.
So let's talk about that a little bit, Jane. What's the new owner look like? I mean, I think we've gotten a lot of new money, a lot of new faces, people coming in from really disassociated industries coming into this business thinking this is where the golden goose is. And are they coming in experienced? Do they know what they need to know? Or obviously that's your bread and butter is to tell them what they don't know. What's the level of experience of a new owner now?
So I really think the level of experience of the new owner are folks, what we're finding are folks that are developers or investors in other asset classes. That might be home development, that might be marinas, that may be hotels, it's storage developers. So they're coming from other asset classes and recognizing the campgrounds as being an asset class to invest in. So their experience level, Mike, in running campgrounds is sometimes, in most times, absolutely zero. But those that come maybe from the hospitality or the hotel business have some hospitality background.
What you mentioned previously, that we hadn't seen this level of development before. I guess, what prevented people from developing campgrounds in the past? I guess why the money just wasn't there.
Yeah, I think the money wasn't there, and I think we're really a mom and pop industry, right? And we still are a mom and pop industry. And that's part of the reason that investors are targeting us right now, because they're seeing opportunity there. But a mom and pop type of business, most mom and pops have a different mentality. They may want to put in cabins, but they're not going to put in 50 cabins and go borrow money, cabins or park models, and go borrow the money to put in 50 park models. And instead they're building it out of cash flow. So their mentality and the way they're looking at it is different. In addition, many of the investors that come into this, they have an exit strategy as well. And mom and pops, when they buy a campground, and it's more of a legacy and it's a family business, so they're not necessarily thinking exit strategy.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's kind of interesting that you brought that up, because I think I've ran into a couple stories where it looks like, you have these developers that come in, build a park, they operate it for a couple of years. The one I was looking at today was from 2019. They opened it in 2019, but they just sold it. So, they did the development work, got the park going, and then they immediately sold it. So that's kind of a little bit what you're talking about, right? As far as having an exit plan.
Yes, because there's companies that are coming into this market or into this asset class that are simply developers. Like they don't want, what they do is develop. That's their business. And they go into it with the intentions of developing it, stabilizing it, and exiting and going on to build the next one. Again, they're not in the business of running campgrounds or RV parks. They're in the business of developing. And that is, to me, is the most significant difference that we're seeing in this industry. Is all of a sudden we have folks like that, developers, that are interested in this industry. And certainly, the number of RV sales, the record RV sales, and then of course the pandemic has really, given camping a shot in the arm.
But hasn't it also taken the employment part of it? These people don't necessarily want to run a campground, and so the pool of qualified managers to run these things has to be so tight right now.
It is. I mean, labor. So I've been in the business since the late 70s, and labor has always been a problem. It's never just been like, oh, it's no problem. It has always been a problem. In fact, when we ran our campgrounds, we had to look to internationals. We had to bring in, kids that were on J1 visas or internationals that were on H2 visas to come in and help run our park, because we would go from, let's say, 18 year-round employees to 60 employees in season. And how do you get there, right? You just couldn't find the staff, and there's a lot of training and retraining, and you cannot give consistent service and offer a consistent experience without having properly trained staff.
Yeah, definitely. I think you mentioned there are people who are coming in building and then have an exit strategy. There are also a lot of companies that seem to be like sticking around. Do you talk with more developers who are interested in owning multiple parks or developing multiple parks, I
Yeah.
guess?
Yep. Actually, I would say that when we get folks that have call us, they always want to build luxury RV parks,
Yep.
and this is the first one of many that they will own.
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
always the start of the conversation. I just had 2 calls like that yesterday, and I'm always like, okay, well, let's start with the first one.
Yep.
And I always correct the word luxury because I really feel that that's misleading. What we want to build are modern quality RV parks.
Yeah.
That's really what campers are looking for.
I think luxury has different connotations for people. Like I mentioned before, like with glamping too, I tent camp, so a small RV is a luxury unit for me. And having like a paved site would be nice. But I imagine if you have one of those big Class A rigs that you spent 200,000 on, then you're looking for probably another level than what I would consider to be luxury. So, um,
But many of the things, like if you are in that big coach, right?
yeah,
You're looking for sites that are angled correctly, roads that are wide enough, pads that are level. So to describe that as quality,
yeah,
to describe that as luxury, it's really you're looking for modern and quality.
yep,
Um,
yeah,
you know, to be able to get into these sites. And imagine driving in one of these 40-foot coaches into the majority of the RV parks or campgrounds across the country. Not an easy
Right. If I could just jump in here, but there's also a minimal expectation, right? We all have different thresholds.
yeah,
And now, for instance, if you talk to the youngest class of people, even if they pulled in an expensive motorhome, they expect or they want to have, decent Wi-Fi because they want to run 4K on every device that they own, which is their phone or maybe their tablet. And so there is some of that expectation that as they build these parks, they need to, we call it forward thinking, that they need to plan for. So everybody's different a luxury. Everybody's definition is probably different. But at the same time, as life progresses, there's certain definitions that become the standard. And we know there's some active change going on right now. And, these parks are built for long term and they're very complicated compared to, they're not like a normal, built an apartment building, which is quite simpler. So you want to build the expectations that you built for the long term, and I think that's the biggest challenge that we all try to look at when we're thinking about developing a new piece of property to a campground.
yeah,
After being in the business for 20 some years, and it was always frustrating because nobody seemed to know how many campgrounds there really were out there. Nobody had an accurate count. We used, even at KOA, we used to estimate that we had 75 to 80,000 sites, but we didn't really know for sure what was up and running. How do we know in the climate that we're sitting in now how many campgrounds we need? How many do we have and how many do we need?
Well, Mike, I think the point that you're making is so spot on because even now we still don't know how many campgrounds we have and how many sites we have. And if you check with Arvik or you check with Good Sam, you come up with different numbers, right? Check with RVIA. Everybody has a different number. And I guess there's more research than ever on this industry, but there really isn't a lot of research on this industry. KOA has always been the research leader and frankly have always been very gracious about sharing all that information, which I appreciate and love when the KOA reports come out monthly and the yearly report. But they're just, we've kind of been that sleepy industry that no one has studied. But you have to look at, I think more so, we have to look at a couple of things. We have to look at, our campgrounds full. right? And right now, frankly, if I can be a little crude, even the crappiest campgrounds are busy on weekends and on 4th of July and Labor Day and so forth, right? And campers, and it's really just happened recently. When I say recently, I'm saying like in the last few years, that we're hearing complaints about this industry, that campers are saying, we can't just be on the road anymore and just pull off. We need advanced reservations, right? We can't get reservations at places that we want to go. And that's true. And certainly, if you go to Florida during snowbird season, and I've experienced this, it's tough to get a site. That's how we have to have our pulse on demand. I mean, we have no other real data to show us.
All right. David, I know you were in the construction business before, and I guess, when you and Jayne are talking with these developers that you are approached with, I guess, how is the supply chain and inflation issues factoring into what you're talking about with these developers now? I have to imagine.
You have to incorporate supply chain into every discussion that you have, certainly on the construction side. And I think a lot of developers will tell you they're getting material, but it's just taking longer. There is a price concern because prices have gone up. Look at what the price of fuel has for diesel. So if you're running any type of equipment, there's a huge cost to that. And that's going to continue to fluctuate. I know we're dipping a little bit now, which is normal in a recession, but it looks like it's going to stay up for a while. And I came from the manufacturing side too, so I have a good understanding. And I was just talking to a manufacturer this week that for building products, and they've already had increases. And what's happened is the manufacturers tried to eat a lot of these increases, and they can eat a 2, 3, 4% increase. But when your cost of your labor goes up dramatically, when your cost of your fuel goes up, and then raw materials, especially if it's coming outside of the U.S., that translates into an ultimate product cost. And I think we're starting to see that. I don't think, people say, oh, by the end of 22, my personal strategy is it's a long-term strategy. We're in this for a while, and when I say a while, I would say at least 18 months or longer, probably longer. And it doesn't mean it's the end of the world, because it's not, but it requires planning, because if you're building a property, people want to build a campground and they want to be done in 6 months. It's difficult for a lot of different reasons, but we just had, where normally we could get pedestals, within a couple of weeks, and now we're talking 8 or 9 months for a custom pedestal, and that's going to continue. So it's just, you got to plan for it. And that's, I think, where Campground Consulting Group comes in, is that we help customers do that. And it's just, there's so many things they're not aware of, but you don't get material, it can shut your whole project down. And we've seen that happen already.
So what about the financing? Is that slowed down also now with the moves to curb inflation?
I don't think so.
No.
Go ahead, Jayne.
There's more lenders available to us than there has been ever before. We normally would tell folks that your best lender is your local lender, right? Because they understand the market you're in. But now there are national banks that are investing in this asset class. And I know that when I work with clients, we're actually shopping it around. There's SBA, there's USDA. So there are options for folks. There's those that are putting together investment groups, right, and attracting investors. So there are options out there.
And if you look at interest rates, historically, they're still lower. They're not. I remember my first mortgage when I was younger was 9.5%, and I was thrilled. So we got to keep it a little bit of perspective here. And what also is driving these projects is profits. So interest rates can be a little higher because the profits are extremely high. And these are all the things that matters, when someone is making a decision if they're going to invest in a property.
I mean, I would say, Ben, I do want to say that, there's not just inflation. There's, there's labor costs, there's labor shortages, there's supply chain issues, there's permitting delays.
Yeah.
In the insurance market has changed and gone crazy. Interest rates. So it's not like just interest rates are affecting things or labor is affecting. It's a storm of different items. There are different headwinds, many different headwinds right now that are affecting
Okay.
things, and I think that some developers are proceeding with much more caution than they have before.
Yeah. I guess you mentioned the permitting. I guess, what's that been like for you guys as you deal with developers? I know it depends on the location of where they want to build the property and everything, but have developers been able to get those types of permits pretty quickly, or has it taken longer than usual, I guess?
I don't think it's taking longer than usual, but other than when the pandemic hit, obviously, and planning board and zoning meetings were shut down, and so forth. Public meetings were shut down. That delayed it. But if we put that aside, I don't think that it's necessarily slower right now. Other than I do think that places that never saw a campground be built, right? Locations that never saw a campground be built now are having be built, and they're implementing and adding zoning ordinances or adding, rules that were never there before because of this awareness. And they have other towns and cities and municipalities they can look towards to say, what have you done? How have you done this? And sometimes having no zoning at all is great, but sometimes it isn't great because they have nothing to follow. The powers to be have nothing to follow. So it's like a windy road. You don't know what's going to happen at the next turn. And then there's places like in the Northeast, for instance, it's super difficult to develop in the Northeast. And many developers will buy a campground, a rundown campground for that reason, because it's already entitled for so many sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one common denominator is probably preparation. If you're going to have to go in front of your planning committee, your local zoning board, which is going to happen, is be prepared. And things go easier. And I think as an industry, as we get more organized on building properties, it gets easier because we know the mistakes, and most zoning boards are receptive to that. But there's always a wild card where sometimes you go right through and you say that was easy, and other times some towns drag their feet, maybe not on purpose, but it does happen. But preparation can certainly reduce that amount of time.
So you talked before about exit strategies. Now we've got a lot of owners out there that have had family-owned parks for a long, long time. Is now the time to sell? Should they be considering that? Are you consulting with people on their exit strategies?
Yes, we are. It's still so. We just came off of a very hot selling market, right? It has slowed down, or let's say people are not getting the high selling prices that they might have got, let's say, a year ago. This said, though, there are still selling opportunities, and there will always be. But one thing that sellers need to do, I have seen some of my clients buy RV parks and campgrounds and virtually steal them, frankly. Okay, because the seller is not educated as to what they have, right? And we've worked with folks, we work with sellers and we work with buyers. It just depends who the client is. But if you are thinking about selling, the best thing to do is to prepare for that sale. Like, you don't want to just wake up today and go, I'm going to sell the park. You want to wake up today and say, you know, in 2 years from now, I would like to retire and I need to start making preparations for the sale of this RV park. And the reason we do this is so that you can get top dollar when we take it to market.
I think when we talked like a year ago, there was a lot more people wanting to buy a park than there were parks. Is that the case anymore?
I do think it's still inbound, you know, it's out of whack, the balance. Yes, there is probably more buyers than sellers, but I think that that's leveling. I don't think it's like the feeding frenzy that it was. No, I think that that buyers actually have time to evaluate deals. There was a point where you didn't really have a lot of time to evaluate a deal. If a location came in that folks wanted, I mean, it was like, okay, let's see who can tie this property up the quickest. And it's been tough. I have some clients that we consistently look for properties for, and it's just been tough to buy properties now because number one, they might be paying top dollar, and the price just wants to make us sit on the sidelines until prices come down.
Is this, like we've seen a lot of development action going on in the glamping market too. So there just seems to be a lot of people in outdoor recreation. The industry's gotten a lot of focus on the national level. We've seen it with the federal government passing a lot of bills that funnel money into state and national parks too. I guess, is this like a bubble? Does this thing like burst at some point and or is it not a bubble? Is it just like going to level out, I guess?
Well, back in 2019, right? Back in 2019, before the pandemic, we were in the bubble. The industry was good. People were reporting double digits increase, right? And when we went into 2020, with a lot of parks reporting double digit increases. And primarily that was because of RV dealers were pushing out those RVs, right? And people were getting into camping. More people were getting into camping. But back in 2019, my point was in 2018, 2019, we were starting to say that we're like, is this going to stop? Is this going to keep going? What's going on? And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and we were one of the industries that actually benefited from the pandemic, right? I mean, it sounds awful to say that, but it's true. We were one of the lucky industries that not only were we accelerating and having a great year in 2019, all of a sudden the pandemic hit, we got shut down for a little while, and then all of a sudden no one could go anywhere and camping was it, right? And now campgrounds are still busy. The economy maybe, or gas prices has maybe slowed it down a little bit. I think more so just has changed habits. And because people, if they don't have money to go camping, they don't have money to do another vacation, and they've got that rig sitting in their yard or that tent up in their attic. And that's the most affordable and easiest way to take a vacation. And we know from history that even in bad times and even in bad economic times, people still have to take their vacations. Maybe they're shorter, maybe they don't go as far, but they still need that vacation. And what's upon us now is retaining all these new campers that are out there. And I know it maybe even sounds a little cliche because everyone's saying this, but camping came into the mainstream in the pandemic and presented us with this industry with this huge opportunity of, we need to satisfy these guests. We need to provide a great experience so that we can keep them camping. And then their children will camp. If you camp, many campers, if you ask them, how'd you get into camping? They say, I camped as a kid, right? We hear that all the time. And, that's what's been great about this. We were an industry that was just catering to the baby boomers. And now we have the Generation Xers, the millennials and younger, who are saying, we love camping. Now, they camp a little bit different than the boomers, but they love camping. And we have more options, Ben, to camp than ever before, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like now you can just go camp in somebody's yard, right? Or boondocking, or there's just so many different options for camping right now.
Yeah, don't you think, it's the demand, right? The demand is being driven.
Mm-hmm.
And to Jayne's point, now there's cabins. Think of how many campgrounds have, gotten some sort of park models or cabins. They've opened up a new set of people. And then on top of that, you add up all the new RV sales. They have to go somewhere. They're not going to just sit in their backyard as they make their monthly payments. So, and we know there's a shortage of campsites, whatever that may not know the exact number, but our sense tells us, I was in Texas last week visiting a lot of campgrounds, and most of them are full, and so there's a lot of signs on the wall that say, the demand is strong. And when demand is strong for the product, the industry generally continues to accelerate. I think that's what we're seeing happening here.
So do you get involved in consulting with glamping developments too? Is that different?
I feel like glamping has been around for longer than advertised, let's say. It's kind of like, I argue with my associates about this all the time, because I feel like the whole tiny home thing, like tiny home, like all of a sudden tiny home. I mean, we had park models for 30 years in the campground industry. We were renting them. That's, a tiny home, so to speak. So it's a marketing term. And so for glamping, like we sold our campground in 2003, and we had 78 beautiful log cabins. I mean, that was glamping. In my mind, that's what was glamping then. So, I know that there are companies out there that have taken glamping to the next level. But I do, with most of our developments, especially the larger developments where they can have a community or an area where we can have glamping. Like glamping has morphed into something a little bit different. Like let's say if you want to glamp in a tent, right? Or if you want to glamp in a geodome, or if you want to glamp now in a treehouse, the unit itself that you're renting, and also the environment that unit is placed in, is really now what glamping is. And that environment is as important as the unit itself. So in other words, if we just have a row of sites, you can't just put a glamping tent there, right? Because that's not the right environment for it. So there are parks that are out there. Like if you go to the Glamping Association meeting that's coming up in October, which is a great meeting, by the way. I have attended it. I'm unable to attend it this year, but I have attended it. And if you go to that meeting, you're going to see more smaller operators than larger operators, right? But that said, there are some large operators that have gotten into glamping. But I feel like it's been around for a long time. It's just that we are now advertising it such. It's getting some traction, and I think Google has helped that.
I found it interesting. Well, back to your tiny home comment, I would just mention that, the RV manufacturers would, they don't like the tiny home monkeyer, but for the park models, but
like if they don't, right? But
yep.
A lot of parks out there that have park models now, and they're marketing them as tiny homes. It's the same thing, What does it say if it quacks like a duck, or look, it's a duck. I mean,
Yep. But I had been to the glamping show for the last few years in person, and of course they had the one on the online for the 2020. But I mean, it is amazing what you see out there, and just what you mentioned, the smaller park. There are a lot of smaller park people out there. I find it surprising the amount of money that was out there last year, because there were people who were looking to develop like a 10 site like glamping park retreat or whatever, and they had millions of dollars at their disposal to spend. So that was kind of amazing for me in the glamping sector, just how much money was in there.
But do the numbers work, and can you
Yes.
get a higher average daily rate? Like we find, if we look at, we do a lot of financial planning and obviously financial performance for new parks, right? And feasibility studies. And folks always ask me like, well, how many sites should I build? And to be honest with you, it depends on the market and what we can get as an average daily rate. But I usually find that you've got to really make the numbers work. We've got to be at least in the 200s as far as sites go. And even higher, even 300 makes the numbers work a lot better. And I'm just saying this because we're running financial models all the time with different amounts of sites. And so if you're going to build like 10 sites and they're going to be glamping units, and you're going to invest that kind of money, and depending upon what the return is you're desiring, I mean, you really have to be able to command a high average daily rate. So in that case, the unit has to be beautiful, and the environment and the location. I mean, you got to have just a perfect storm, frankly.
What I found interesting with the glamping sector is that there's definitely a section of them that are doing it for hobbies too. So some of them just they wouldn't mind making a profit, but they also just want to do it, and it's a hobby for them. So that's kind of an interesting part of the glamping sector that I don't think RV parks and campground, we don't see a lot of that. So
It's good. It's good for the industry. It brings in a class of people that maybe wouldn't go camping. I mean, we all have memories of maybe when we were younger gone camping, and then some people kind of go in a different, say, to a more hotel style vacation, and then they discover glamping and say, "Hey, I love being in a campground, but I just don't want to be in a tent on the ground." And we know that people that go glamping, the next year they come back and they bought their own RV, and all of a sudden they realize, roughing it a little bit more is better than what they thought. So I think it's a nice way to bring new people to the industry, and that's our lifeblood. That's the reason the industry is growing right now. It's because of things like glamping.
I mean, back to your rate comment, Jayne. Some of these places are charging tremendous rates. There's definitely glamping parks that are in the $400 to $500 a night range. I think I've seen some even higher than that, depending on the location. So it is pretty incredible what people are willing to pay to go glamping. But maybe back to David's point, maybe they pay $600 a night one time, and then they're like, well, maybe I could buy an RV and do it a little cheaper next time. I don't know. So.
And Jen, I really believe that. Like, I don't know, in glamping, I don't know if it's like a 1 or 2 up experience.
Yeah,
it's not a repeat experience. So I think what you said is very, very important. That I don't know if you can sustain that, and they maybe morph into some other type of camper if they want to continue to camp.
There's a lot of, just a comment, there's a lot of mixed couples, where the husband is gung ho and I'm going to go rough it. And then the rest of his family and the wife is saying, whoa, 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 I need hot water and I need a bed and I need a widescreen TV. So, that glamping fills that niche perfectly. And where they end up, it's going to be somewhere in between. And we know there's a lot of options with, all the great new RVs that are being built, and also the great parks that have so many different ways to enjoy the experience.
Yeah. I mean, and then we're seeing agritourism come in a little bit to its own. I think we have a story up on WCWoodallsCM.com today about an agritourism location in Wisconsin, and that's kind of interesting. I know we did a profile on a llama farm that has a decent, I think, 50 RV sites, and you can like stay and pet llamas, and the llamas actually like walk around the RVs and stuff. I don't know if I'm that big of a fan of a llama, but I guess so.
Well, it's about the experience now. I mean, it's got to be the experience, and it's got to be unique, and that's what's drawing people and what's setting them apart. So maybe the era of just having sites in somewhat the right location is not quite as popular as that exquisite experience that we can offer.
Apparently, it's easier to go to a park that has llamas than bring a llama with you camping.
I don't know. The pet thing is increasing, so maybe there's some park owners out there with some really great stories about what RVers bring along with them. So who knows? Maybe somebody's tried bringing a pet llama. So.
I wouldn't doubt it.
So maybe Mike's gonna get a llama when he gets back to the mainland.
Hey, we were out hiking in a kind of a remote valley a few months ago, and we got passed by these people that had a pack goat, and this goat was all loaded up with their stuff and was just trailing along behind them, and they had it in their back of their car when they left. So
wasn't goats. Story about a woman that tried to board a plane with a peacock.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's a famous one. Yeah, it's.
Well, yeah.
Who knows?
When you're in the camping business, you get to see it all. That's what I get. I have reminisced with many campground owners about guests that have been to our campgrounds, and we certainly all could write a book on that.
Well, wasn't there? I've read some campgrounds that have a winery connected to the property or next door that they do some great. I mean, there's some great things agriculturally that people are interested in. That it's a wonderful way to get exposed to it, right? What's a better way than camping? I think that's that's great.
A lot of parks have chicken coops. They have beehives. I've been seeing more and more of that as we get out there in the field.
Yeah, I know RVC Outdoor Destinations has their bee program that they do, where I think the majority of their parks have a beehive and some educational components. And then, there's parks up by where you guys live, up near Maine, where they do lobster hunting and clamming and different things, just these different experiences. And then, of course, parks that work with other local businesses like breweries and wineries and different things to offer experiences. So yeah, like what Mike said, it's definitely about the experience nowadays. People want different experiences. So,
and you don't get that when you go to a hotel. As many wonderful hotels there are, we are in such a unique position that when you develop a park properly to offer experiences that no one else can provide.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's about all we had. I did want to ask Jayne. This is here. I'm going to show it up on the screen. This is the URL I had for your business, Campground Consulting Group. Is that still the right URL, or do you guys have it?
Yes, the GoranCohenConsulting.com still forwards to Campground, but we are changing stuff over to CampgroundConsultingGroup.com.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes when you change a name and stuff, it can take a while to do some of that stuff.
You don't realize how many places you have to change it in when you start doing that. But we wanted the name. So when we started the firm, we reached out to different associates who we felt were experts in different aspects of the industry. And David and I, worked on that, and we have a great team, and everybody brings different talent to the team, and everyone has a lot of campground experience. And I just thought that, Goren and Cohen kind of sounded like a Jewish law firm, not like Campground Consulting Company. So David never wanted to change the name, and while he was actively involved, I respected that. But after his retirement, I thought, well, let's have our name tell people what we really do.
Yep. So that's great. One quick comment before we leave. Somebody just commented. This
Oh.
Bozeman Hot Springs Campground has 12 pools of natural spring water with temps ranging from 56 to 106 degrees. So that would be pretty nice.
Yeah,
After-
I'm
Very
very
nice.
familiar with that. The campground part of that facility used to be a KOA, so it's a former one there, and it is a beautiful spot.
Yeah.
So Ben, I don't know if you know this, but my husband and I just bought a camper van.
Okay.
And we're getting ready this fall to get out there in the van and, do some boondocking, go to try all the different options that are out there, as well as visit a lot of my clients. But yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, hopefully you have a enjoyable time doing that. I know my wife and I have talked about doing that for a while. We just haven't gotten the van or the RV yet. We have a lot of kids, so we'd probably be looking at like one of these huge Class A's or something. I know we had Joe Dumig on here from At My Communities a few weeks ago, and he went across the country for the most part with how many, like 6 or 7 people. So
Wow.
that's
a lot.
pretty incredible. So
Yeah, we make a pitch on here once in a while for some manufacturer to give Ben a rig,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
what better way to torture test your rig than give it to Ben Gwiggle?
Yep, I'm still waiting for the phone call for my free rig. So
It's coming.
well, yeah, it's
It's
coming.
coming.
but thanks, Jayne and David, for
You're welcome.
letting Mike and I
Thank you.
pester you with questions for the last 40 minutes or so. And thanks everyone for watching, and we look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks,
Yeah.
Mike.
Bye.
Bye.